Hello, my name is Marie Ricks. I'm a professional organizer, and today we're going to do the last of 3 sessions on home organization. It is my hope by attending to the principles and practices that are talked about in these 3 sessions that your life will be better from this day forward. Home organization, the better way to live, and the concept of 10% advantage is a way of approaching your life such that you can get more done in less time, more effectively, and thus be of more use to the Lord. Shall we start today with the scripture? It says in Doctrine and Covenants 10:4 that we are not to run faster or labor more than we have strength and means provided. This last in the series of these organizational classes is about how to manage stress, trauma, and challenge and still stay organized. I'm going to give you some skills and some understanding of maybe some possible ways to approach this concept of organization when real life descends or life gets just a little bit more stressful than you'd ever hoped that it would be. The concept of the 10% advantage is that we have 24 hours in every day. And if we sleep for about 8 of those hours, we have 16 hours with which to do most of all our responsibilities, including taking care of our home management needs. If we can function just 10% more better than we have in the past, we're going to gain about 1.6 hours a day, or about 90 minutes every day. And if we do that day in and day out, continually working to improve our organizational skills, we're going to get more than 32 days in a year. It really does make a difference. So come with me, and together we'll look at some principles and practices that will help you shave those minutes and those seconds and those hours from your everyday life and make you feel more in control and a little bit organized. This last session, we are going to work on the 2 principles of rushed to relaxed and simultaneous to sequential. There is often times in your life where despite your best efforts, you're going to have a catastrophe, a tragedy, or maybe just a new church calling that's going to cause your stress level to go out of the roof. The skills that we're going to learn today are going to focus on understanding how to best work through those seasons and still keep your home organization skills in place. So if we can gain the skills to act more poised than we sometimes feel, it'll help us when we have to continue to function in the outer part of our life while the inner part of our life is reorganizing itself, or managing chaos, or coping with grief. Let's first look at the lesson of the knitted sweater. I remember a very long time ago, we found in a bag a sweater that my mother had partially knit before she passed away. I was very excited to get the sweater and to inherit it because I had a new granddaughter coming. And it was my thought that I'll just keep right on knitting the sweater the way that my mother did, and then I would give this special sweater to my granddaughter. The challenge was that I didn't know how to knit the way my mother did. I didn't have the skills that she had. I didn't have the pattern that she used. And after a little bit of work, I was able to knit the sweater the best way that I could. It was a little different way than she was knitting. And after I had knitted most of the sweater, come around one sleeve, come across the back, and come to the last sleeve, I found that the last part of the sweater went pretty great. What I did not know is I was knitting in a creative way and an impossible way. And when the sweater was done, one side of the sweater was about 1.5 inches longer than the other side of this baby sweater. And so I hadn't found the best way for me to knit that sweater. In my anguish, and because of a time limitation, the best thing for me to do was to undo my mistake and to start over again, and to ask myself, what is going to be my way to finish this knitted sweater? This is how life often is. We often come into something in that we're trying to manage someone else's mess. Sometimes we don't know how to proceed. Sometimes we don't know how to handle the stress. So let's focus on some things that'll help us learn from the lesson of the knitted sweater. When we're working from being rushed to relax, we have to learn 3 new skills. We have to learn how to eliminate, cancel, and delete. The next thing we'll talk about during this portion of the session is preparing this time for every time so that when we are stressed, things are already in place and rolling pretty good in our life, so things can keep rolling on their own for a while until our stresses reduce and we can work back into handling things differently. We're going to talk a little bit about writing something down once so that it can be written down forever. So it'll be retrievable, and so we'll be able to find it when we need it. And then lastly, we're going to talk about the power of standardizing the procedures of most everything we do so that it moves to the background in our life and becomes very automatic, leaving our head and our heart ready to handle the stresses that are ahead of us. If we were to diagram what this might look like on this graphic, you will see that at the first part, life is pretty normal. And then there comes a season where the stress increases, and eventually we can anticipate that life is going to go back to normal, even if it's a new normal instead of the old normal. The skills that we want to focus on is how do we eliminate, how do we cancel, and how do we delete. When we're under stress, part of organization is learning to simplify, to simplify, to simplify. What this often means is that we have to eliminate the lesser important part of our responsibility so we can focus on the things that are most important. I often liken this to a target. So we might have the center of the target, which represents you, and it is very important that even under stress, you continue to take care of your personal organization. And then if you happen to be married, you will take care of your relationship with your spouse. If you're single, you would go to the next circle, which might include children or grandchildren. And then around that circle might be your responsibilities at work, and around that your responsibilities for church calling. And on the very, very outer part of your circle, you will be saving the world. During stressful times, some of those things are going to have to be eliminated. In other words, you're going to pull your target in and in so that you can focus on the things that need your help. In another way, you might have to watch your time usage and have to cancel some of your previous engagements or cancel out of things that you do regularly. So I remember during a season of my life when a young child was sick with leukemia, I went to my Relief Society president and said I'd still like to be a ministering sister, but it's not going to be possible for me to go visiting or to meet people in person because my son was in a period when he needed to be isolated and I needed to be isolated with him. So I canceled those broader responsibilities, but said I was still willing to be a ministering sister if I could have 2 or 3 sisters that could use a letter or a short text. Emotionally, I did not even have the energy or the capacity to call and talk to someone because my own troubles felt so heavy upon me, I didn't feel like I could handle other people's problems. So I canceled out those things that were not necessary so I could deal with the stress of what was in front of me. Deleting is just like moving the deleting button on your computer. Sometimes you just have to wipe things out. I remember that I had some commitments that I had committed to with regards to speaking engagements, and I simply had to call without explanation and say, I've committed to speak, but I'm unable to do it at this time, and I will have to not be able to do that for you. I'll have to delete my commitment. So as you look in your stressful times and you still want to stay organized, we have to think about these 3 words. What is it that I can eliminate? What is it that I can cancel? And what is it can I delete so that I can still maintain order in the most important parts of my life and be able to address the issues that are ahead of me? The next concept I would like to talk about is the capacity and the skill to prepare this time for every time. There are several principles that we'll talk about today. One is duplication. When we approach life and organization, we have to be thinking long term. I remember when our first son went on a mission, he asked me to prepare some simple recipes on 3x5 cards that he could take with him in his suitcase so he could have the recipes for some rudimentary meals until he got used and acclimatized to the country where he was going to be living and the language that he was going to be speaking. So our first principle is duplication. Because there were 4 sons in our family going on missions, if I was making recipe cards for the first son going on his mission, it wasn't that much more work for me to print those recipes 4 times, even though it would be almost 12 years before the last son would go on a mission. Because I had done it once and prepared for every time, it was now done for the 2nd, the 3rd, and the 4th son's mission. So what we're trying to do as we think organizationally is we're trying to think, if I need to do it once, do I also need to do it several times so it'll be ready for someone else down the line? Next, I encourage you to think about the concept of lamination. If you're a primary chorister, you know very well what I'm talking about. If we prepare something and don't laminate it, it's likely to get stained, ruined, ripped, or not be able to be used for a long period of time. So we're not just talking about the principle and the practice of lamination, we're talking about the concept. When we do something, we want to do it so it doesn't have to be done again and again and again. We want to do it well enough that we can plan on it functioning for 5, 10, 15, maybe even 20 years. So when I am a primary chorister now, everything gets laminated because children can slobber, they can lick, they can smudge, and the handout that's inside that lamination is still going to be perfectly fine. The next concept I encourage you to do in your personal life is to have forms that will help you be able to function. In my speaking, I travel quite a bit and was always struggling because I was leaving something out of my suitcase. And so I created a form that listed all the things that I need to take when I travel. Having a form and a little check mark by each one of the items has made it so I travel a lot more smart and a lot less frazzled because I have a form that reminds me about all the things that I need to have. When you think about it, there is not much in your life that would not benefit by having a form. For this reason, our brain is not very good at remembering. It's much better at diagnosing and solving problems. So let that part of your life, which can be reduced to a form to do remembering, do that job. That frees up your brain to do other things. The fourth thing that I'd like to talk about is file systems. If you have a way to tame the paper tiger in your life by keeping papers where they belong and being able to retrieve them, you will find that this part of your life will be much, much better. Generally, we have three kinds of paperwork in our life. We have things that are vital. These are documents that say we're alive, such as our birth certificate, our death certificate, marriage papers, maybe divorce papers, adoption papers. They should be filed separately from papers that are more in the present for our life, the soccer schedule for this year, the plan for how we're going to do activity days over the next 9 months. And then we have a third category of paperwork, which are historical documents. They should be filed in their own separate place because they need to be kept in more archival quality folders and binders and sheet protectors. So I encourage you to think about the file systems that you have set up in your life. Or maybe you don't even have any file systems, you just have what we might call the stacking system. Remember that if a paper is in a stack, it's lost. But when a paper is in a folder, it's found. Setting up filing systems and creating the opportunity to use them and practice until it works really well is a great time saver in life. Lastly, I encourage you to decide now and forever what gift you're going to give for different occasions. Let me give you an example. Long time ago, when I was married, we needed a snake, as we called it, which is just really a green hose. It was the one thing we didn't get for our wedding, and we realized it was a really good gift, especially so the guy gets at least one gift at the wedding reception. So we made a decision. Every time we go to a wedding reception, we'll take a snake or a green hose. This decision was made for forever. Wedding, take a hose. The same thing can go for holidays, Christmas, birthdays. Decide about these small things so that you don't have to decide over and over again. What starts to happen is people anticipate that if they invite you to a baby shower, they're probably going to get a certain kind of gift for you. I tend to like bibs because it was the one thing I could have used more of when I was a young mother. So in these ways, thinking about preparing this time for every time by using the concepts of lamination, duplication, forms, file systems, and gift giving will set you in place so that there is less that you have to worry about. And again, we're only trying to take 2 seconds off a 20-second project or 2 minutes off a 20-minute project. But by doing this over and over again, we gain time and time and time. Now let's talk about writing it down once and making it be written down forever. Let's brainstorm for a minute. There are some things that we write down for whatever reason. Let's say that you get online and you look up where the best place is to buy new tires. Did you know that if you pull up contact information once, it's very likely, almost 90% likely, that you're going to need that number or that contact information again? So by having a system where if you collect information, you can collect it forever, it makes life so much easier. Let's think about templates. Sometimes it's just really helpful if you have a template in place so that when you call and are asking questions and doing research, you know exactly what to ask for. This is really helpful if you're constructing a new home or renovating a room where you need to have certain specific pieces of information when you're doing your investigation that you would be able to repeat. Thirdly, I encourage you to have permanent master lists. These are lists that you make that help you be able to write something down once and then remember it. Remember, the phrase is, the brain is for thinking and writing is for remembering. In addition to the filing system that we've talked about, I encourage you, once you have written something down, to look at that piece of paper, the piece of paper that you're filing, and then ask yourself this question. If I file this paper, I'll likely keep it for 40 years or more. If I'm going to keep it that long, is it worth keeping for 40 years? Many times we want to collect handouts and information from talks that we have attended or seminars where we've been, and it's very unlikely that that paperwork will ever be used again. So be very judicious as you're doing your filing systems that you don't put something away which really should be tossed away. Lastly, I encourage you to standardize all of your life so that you have duplication and standardization for your keys. Your keys should have a home when you come in the door. All of your keys should be duplicated. If you buy one pair of reading glasses, I encourage you to buy two. They're not terribly expensive, and the chances of losing those first reading glasses is pretty high. And then also have a very steady place where you put your rings so they don't get flushed down the toilet like a couple of my clients have faced. I encourage you to have a system for your receipts and your bills. If you go someplace and get a receipt, let's say from the grocery store, and you've just gotten milk and eggs and cheese, you don't need to keep that receipt. So as it's given to you, I encourage you to crumple it and then either put it in your pocket or put it in your purse. Then when you see it again, you know it can be discarded because you already made the decision when you got the receipt. In the same way, if you have a piece of paper and you're looking at it and it can be shredded, you fold it in half long ways so that when you pick it up again, you can say, that paper's done, I don't need to do anything with it, and you can go shred it. If the paper's still full and open, it means that you've looked at it and it should be left alone. These are just some ideas of systems, but I encourage you to have all kinds of systems in your life so that you can tell to yourself and to others how paperwork and bills should be handled. Remember that some bills come to our home and some are paid online. The more, of course, that you can get your bills paid online and automatically, the better it is. But when a bill comes or other paperwork comes into your life, I encourage you to have a procedure that you never read a letter professionally from, say, an attorney or from your medical things without a yellow highlighter. So you can highlight the date of the letter. You can highlight the insurance number. You can highlight the date when this letter needs to be replied to. Always be reading with the idea that you don't want to have to read anything but the highlights again. I encourage you also to consider your birthdays and your holidays and set up a procedure so that people can plan for repetitive, traditional anticipation. We find that in families, if people can anticipate that certain things are going to happen on birthdays and holidays, the anticipation is part of the joy of looking forward to the holiday. And for those of you that are frazzled around Christmas, my best advice is this. Do all your Christmas traditions, but don't do them every year. Take half of your Christmas traditions and do them on the odd year, and the other half of your Christmas traditions and do them on the even year. Christmas time is not a time to be frazzled or be rushed. It's a time to be relaxed. And if you really, really, really have a tight Christmas schedule right now, take all of those things that you like to do during Christmas time and divide them among 3 years. What we want to do is we want to move ourselves to a place where we are orderly inside and outside. So we are more relaxed and therefore more able to be connecting emotionally with those that we love best. And lastly, as we've talked about with the green hose, look at all your gift giving and create what is called the gift secret shelf. When I go to the store to buy a hose for a wedding, I don't just buy one hose, I buy a dozen. And when I go to get bibs for the baby showers, I don't just buy one bib, I buy a dozen. And these are kept in my gift secret shelf. So my shopping is reduced and my frustration is reduced. When that wedding invitation comes or the shower invitation comes, I simply pull the item off my secret shelf, I wrap it, put a little note on it, and I'm ready to go. Can you see how what we're doing is we're taking all the things we do regularly in our life and we're moving them so they take less and less time, less and less trouble, less and less decision making. And then, of course, as we're thinking about the events that we commit to, I encourage you to think judiciously as you think about the target system. I've been invited to go to this event. Somebody's asked me to go to a play, or someone's asked me to be involved in a sports event, and think, is my own life in place? Is my life in place with my spouse if you have one, with my children if they're still living at home, or grandchildren? Am I free to leave those things so that I can go to an event, or do I need to pay instead attention to these first 2 or 3 circles around my target? Having all of these things in place that we've talked about will help you move from being more rushed and unsettled to being more relaxed. And the whole goal, in addition to saving time when we get organized, is to be a different kind of person than when people are around us. They feel safe and pleasantly relax themselves. Now let's move forward and talk about simultaneous to sequential. Several times in our life, and from my experience, it's usually about 3 to 5 times in your life, you're going to need to handle some inevitably great stress in your life. This is usually times when tragedy strikes, or you find yourself with one of the 5 major life events: a move, a job change, going off to college, coming home from college, going on a mission, coming home from a mission, preparing for a senior mission. When those kinds of stresses really tighten in our lives, we need to learn the skill of moving from simultaneous to sequential. Let's see a little bit about what that looks like. When we live simultaneously, we very much are like the juggler that has got balls in the air, and their hands are moving all the time, and they're catching those balls and throwing those balls and catching those balls and throwing those balls. When the stress really gets tight and the trauma really gets high, or we're having to make some really major decisions, we need to let the balls all fall in our hands, and we need to put them down on the table, and we need to stop living simultaneously and start living sequentially. Sometimes we're going to put some of those balls away for this time, but we move from trying to do so much, and we relieve ourselves so that we have the emotional energy, the physical energy to deal with whatever is in front of us. So these are some of the questions that we will talk about in this section. Is this the best season for me to be doing the things that I'm doing? Is there a way that I can go slower so that I can get more done that's important? How do I do more things less often so I have more time to do the things that need my attention during this season? Is it possible for me to do a partial job instead of the whole job and get by? And if all else fails, what if I asked for a rain check? So let's decide about the best season. I remember a long time ago I had 4 young children. I really was a little bit overwhelmed by being a mother. I was pregnant with my 5th, and I went to visit my aunt. She was making articulated teddy bears. These are wonderful teddy bears that have arms that move back and forth and legs that move back and forth. And I was pretty jealous that she had the time to do that. So I asked her if she would teach me how to make teddy bears. And she said, "Marie, this is not your season for making teddy bears. You're going to be old, bored, and gray for long enough years down the line. Instead, why don't you just raise your boys right now? And a long time from now, I'll teach you how to make teddy bears." So these are questions we can ask ourselves. Is the thing that's in front of me that I think I really need to be involved in during this season, particularly when there's tragedy or challenge or a lot of stress, can it wait? Should it wait? Am I willing to let it wait? Am I willing to learn the lesson of the teddy bears? It was an important life-changing experience for me, and it's helped me understand that some things are important, but it may not be my season for those things. Maybe my season needs, again, like we've talked about, taking care of myself, taking care of my spouse if I have one, taking care of children and grandchildren, taking care of my job and my church calling. And maybe some of these other things are more on the periphery of my life, and it's just not my season. I encourage you very proactively to engage in the skill of slowing down. Most of the time we don't trip if we see the step in front of us that needs to be such that we raise our foot. So here are some things I'd like you to practice saying and thinking about in the different pressures that you have from different people in your life. I would be happy to come, but I won't be done here until such and such a time. It is okay to prioritize who you pay attention to and what you pay attention to and for how long you pay attention to it. There will always be people in your life that want you there yesterday. Setting boundaries of this sort liberates you to do what matters most first. So you might say, I can, but I can't start until after I've done this and that. And if you need to make a joke, you can say, I can, but I'll need the help of 300 people. In other words, keep it light as you're having to say no, but ask for the appropriate help and support if, in fact, you can help, but you will need some other support. In addition, I'd like you to consider never purchasing anything where you just buy one. The mantra that I use as a little saying that might be useful to you is if you need one, buy two. If you need two, buy four. And if you need four, buy more. Because shopping takes a lot of energy. And whether it's real-time shopping in a brick and mortar and brick store or if we're doing it online, don't ever purchase just one box of Band-Aids. You're going to need Band-Aids probably for the whole year. So if you need one box of Band-Aids, buy two. If you need 2 boxes of Band-Aids, buy 4. And eventually, you'll just start buying Band-Aids by the year. Also, when you're cooking, baking, or doing almost anything else, do double batches. It doesn't take that much longer to make a bigger batch than it does a smaller batch. So I have a very resourceful friend that never makes cookies just for now. She always makes 2 batches of dough, cooks 1 batch of dough, and takes the other batch of dough, scoops it out onto a cookie sheet, freezes those little circular balls, and then when she wants fresh cookies, all she has to do is pull those balls out of the freezer and put them right into the oven. This double batch mentality can work in so many places in your life and will save again that time that we're trying to save. 2 minutes off 20 minutes, 2 seconds off a 20-second job. Third, never cook a meal just for one meal, especially if you're cooking meats. I encourage you to always cook meats for at least 4 meals. And then you can take the 3 extra portions of meat and have them ready, either shredded, chopped, or cut up in the freezer for the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th meal. This will help simplify and systemize your meals so that you're cooking less often because more of your ingredients, and I said that wrong, you're not cooking less often, you're cooking for less time because more of your ingredients are ready, primed, cooked, and accessible. I'd also encourage you to have the deep freezer mentality. Very sadly, a deep freezer didn't come into my life until I'd been married more than 25 years. And so it was a really fascinating change for me to be able to have orange juice frozen in my freezer and bread frozen in my freezer and butter frozen in my freezer for months at a time. But having that little freezer in my life changed and increased my capacity to function because so much of the grocery store was now in my own home. I encourage you to have that kind of mentality. What can I do so that I'm more ready and prepared at home so that I can just function by opening a cupboard instead of having to climb in my car and go down and down and down to get to the store? I also encourage you to think about, deciding about, and actually implementing the concept of doing a partial job. This might sound like, I can help, but I can only do this part. My joke always is, I'm sure happy to help with that meal that you'd like me to bring into that family, but the only thing that I can do is to bring the napkins. That's a little bit of a joke, but the concept is, I'm happy to contribute, but in this season of my life, I can only do this part. I can help, but I won't be able to show up till the end. So why don't you put me on the cleanup crew? I can help set up, but I'll need to leave by 8 o'clock because I have another commitment. I use that term, another commitment, because sometimes that other commitment is just to myself. Sometimes by the end of the day, I'm simply too weary to go clear till 10 o'clock. I need to stop by 8 and give myself some alone time so that I have a couple of hours to rev up for the needs and the pressures of the next day. We are personally responsible to keep our own personal life ordered sufficiently that we're not only able to help today, but tomorrow, for the whole week, and for the whole month. Sometimes things are so stressed that we need to ask for a rain check. I'd like to help, but I need to wait until 10 o'clock before I can be there. I'd be happy to help, but not for another 20 years. And sometimes we have to tell that joke because people are very anxious to involve us and we're very happy to help. And sometimes we're not free to explain the emotional, the mental, or the physical limitations that are around us. And so we need to be able to decline politely, but firmly. Thank you for asking, but this is really not a great time for me. Brothers and sisters, learning to be personally, familially, and at home organized are skills that we can work on day in and day out. And as soon as we get them all figured out and we feel like we're organized, it seems like some magic thing happens in our life, usually a great opportunity, sometimes an opportunity for an improvement in our life, and then we go into chaos again. So for most of our life, we're working from chaos to order, from difficulty to smoothness, from not having enough time to gaining more time. May we all consistently and cheerfully move into the next chaos of our life and figure out how to make it more organized. Remember, the 10% advantage is the concept that you can improve, you can get better, you can get faster, and regain and gain initially those 90 minutes every day. And in those 90 minutes, you'll be able to attend to other things that are on your mind. Service of the Lord, renewing relationships, reconciling with a friend, taking care of your children and grandchildren. May the Lord bless you in this endeavor, that you will feel and know and create and work until life is more orderly in every aspect of your life, is my hope for you in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.